Hello, and welcome to Unity of Fredericksburg. My name is Chris, and I'm pleased to welcome all of you to the Unity of Fredericksburg weekly online gathering. At Unity of Fredericksburg, we're advancing the movement of spiritual awakening and transformation through unity, a positive path for spiritual living. We thank those of you watching on YouTube, live or later, and invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're able to attend live, we encourage you to join us in the Zoom community room for the full Sunday morning experience with music, prayer, and connection. Our weekly newsletter includes the Sunday service link, and you can subscribe to receive that on our website at uofva.org. For everyone local to Central Virginia, Unity of Fredericksburg offers a variety of fun and enriching in-person gatherings each month. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter at uofva.org for all the details. Our message today comes from our minister, Reverend Cheryl Fair. Now, here's Reverend Cheryl.
Thank you, Chris. Hello, 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 everyone. So glad to be here with everyone in the Zoom room. And for all of you who are watching on YouTube, whether you're watching now or later, we are so pleased to have you a part of the Unity of Fredericksburg community. So our broadcast date today is Sunday, October the 6th. I have a couple of little news stories for the beginning of October. Did you know that on October the 1st, Jimmy Carter, the 39th president of the United States and a proud peanut farmer from Plains, Georgia, turned 100, the first president to become a centenarian? Here's a quote from Jimmy Carter. "I believe that anyone can be successful in life regardless of natural talent or the environment within which we live. This is not based on measuring success by human competitiveness for wealth, possessions, influence, and fame, but adhering to God's standards of truth, justice, humility, service, compassion, forgiveness, and love." So isn't that a wonderful statement? Happy birthday, President Jimmy Carter. We mentioned last week the Jewish High Holy Days, because we do have folks in our community who like to follow interfaith themes. So the High Holy Days conclude at the end of this week on October 11th through 12th with Yom Kippur, which is also known as the Day of Atonement. It is the holiest day of the year for Jews, and its central themes are atonement and repentance. So Jews traditionally observe this holy day with a 25-hour period of fasting and intensive prayer. So this is not something where you say, Happy Yom Kippur. If you know someone, if you want to extend wishes for Yom Kippur, say, have a good fast. So that's some news from the beginning of October. And now we'll turn our focus to our ongoing work on this annual theme of ours at Unity of Fredericksburg, which is well-being. And for the month of October, we are focusing on emotional well-being. So we're going to be looking at getting to know our emotions better, valuing our emotions, and interpreting our emotions through the filter of spirit, of course, through the filter of our divine nature. Now, my title for today is Inside Out Unity Style, and that's based on the popular film that's out now. It's an animated film. I don't know if any of you all have seen it, or it's actually a sequel. So there was one before it called Inside Out, and this is Inside Out 2. And basically, it's an animated film, which is, of course, pitched to young people. And it's all about learning about emotions. Now, I have to tell you, but when I was a kid back in the olden days, we didn't have movies about learning about our emotions, did we? This is a fairly new thing, certainly in American culture, because traditionally and historically, there actually has been an attitude in American culture that kind of looks down on emotions and values intellect above emotions. Are you aware of that? So here's a quote that kind of really brings some life to this. This is a quote from a British author, George MacDonald Fraser, and he was writing in the aftermath of World War II. Whatever sorrow was felt, there was no point in talking or brooding about it, much less in making a parade of it. Better and healthier to forget it and look to tomorrow. The celebrated British stiff upper lip, the resolve to conceal emotion, which is not only embarrassing and useless, but harmful, is just plain common sense. So part of this attitude, which showed up in all kinds of things for a good number of generations, kind of the supremacy of the intellect over the emotion, shows up in American culture where we tend to honor achievement oriented emotions like go team, that kind of thing. And we do tend to culturally bypass more nuanced feelings or more complicated feelings. And very often, emotions and intellect are presented as some kind of a duality, like it has to be either or. So, an example that comes to mind for me, because of the generation that I am, is themes that were prevalent in the TV show Star Trek, which only had 3 seasons in the late 1960s, but has gone on to spur all kinds of follow-up TV series and films and all that stuff. But if we remember back to the original Star Trek, those of you who remember, there was a contrast between the logical science officer Spock from the planet Vulcan and the passionate and impulsive Captain Kirk from Earth, and that kind of, the back and forth between logic and emotion. Here's a quote from Spock. May I say that I have not thoroughly enjoyed serving with humans? I find their illogic and foolish emotions a constant irritant. So this cultural bias is fairly prevalent that sort of minimizes and maybe even makes fun of an emotional nature. And I'm sorry to say, my friends, but I need to be honest, this bias actually shows up in the writings of our Unity founders because they were products of the times in which they lived, right? So Unity came about in an era of intellectual exploration. The New Thought movement was around the end of the 1800s, the beginning of the 1900s. So here is what we find as a definition of emotions in The Revealing Word by Charles Fillmore. Emotions: undisciplined or uncontrolled forces, subnormal or supernormal activity of mental or physical forces, excitement of the feelings. So there are passages in those early writings where emotions are presenting as something outside of normal and something to be managed, not something to be valued. And we do find this bias shows up in other spiritual threads of teaching too. The Course in Miracles will say you have but two emotions, love and fear, which is, quite a simplification. There's a lot more emotional depth than that. And here's a quote from Ernest Holmes in The Science of Mind. In the well-balanced person, emotion is controlled by the intellect. But in many people, there's a conflict between the emotion and the intellect. Emotion uncontrolled produces chaos. So just take a deep breath with me, my friends, just right here. Take a deep breath, because as we go through this talk this morning, we really do have an opportunity for healing this. because the gifts of the intellect and the gifts of emotion are all gifts of spirit, gifts of God mind expressing through each of us, and they're equally valuable, equally meaningful. So we're going to take a few moments as we go through here and see if we can do a little healing around this so that we can be with our emotions in a healthy and loving sort of way. Now, I will say, to follow up all that stuff that I've read to you, that as the late 20th century came around and the 21st century has really brought about an evolution of awareness when it comes to emotions. So brain science has evolved to recognize the importance of emotional intelligence and emotional health. And we now have a couple generations of young people out on the earth, the millennial generation, followed by Gen Z, and they have a much more expansive emotional vocabulary. And these young people are out in the world insisting that and demanding that emotional health be addressed in education, in the workplace, in all areas of human activity. And we've got authors and social scientists cranking out wonderful resources for us so that we can enhance our own understanding of emotions. So a book that I'm going to be using quite a bit this month as we talk about emotional well-being is Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. And Brene Brown is a very well-known author, and she shares a lot about shame in particular has been something she's shared a lot about. This Atlas of the Heart is just a wonderful resource in this book, and it's a beautiful book, by the way. It's just a gorgeous book. It's like, just the quality of the pages and everything are just wonderful to read. She and her team explore 87 emotions over 13 chapters. Let me just read something for you to give you an idea of what her intent was with this book. So here she is saying, our ability to accurately recognize and label emotions is referred to as emotional granularity. In the words of Harvard psychologist Susan David, learning to label emotions with a more nuanced vocabulary can be absolutely transformative. David explains that if we don't have a sufficient emotional vocabulary, it is difficult to communicate our needs and get the support that we need from others. But those who are able to distinguish between a range of various emotions do much, much better at managing the ups and downs of ordinary existence than those who see everything in black and white. In fact, research shows that the process of labeling emotional experience is related to greater emotional regulation and psychosocial well-being. So, hurrah for resources like that can help us learn and grow with this whole topic of emotional well-being. And thankfully, Unity is always learning and growing. So we are not a spiritual path that continues to repeat the things that were written more than 100 years ago. We learn and grow with it. So the metaphysical textbook that Unity uses, that was published in 2008. So in the 21st century, is let's focus on this heart-centered metaphysics. Heart-Centered Metaphysics by Paul Hasselbeck. So in today's Unity, we value the emotional and intellectual natures as equally essential to our overall well-being. So let's take a breath right here. I want to do a little healing practice. So put your hand over your heart space, if you will, and just send love to your heart space. So those quotes that I read earlier, those are things that have been in culture for a long time and that many of us are carrying in our consciousness, in the background, kind of judging. So let's just send some love into our heart space and feel that energy of love coming back. So some of you who've been in a workshop with me recently are familiar with the practice of Ho'oponopono. We'll do that really quickly here. It's a Hawaiian spiritual practice that helps us to turn our attention away from those old beliefs that minimize or disregard emotions and bring us back to center. So we do that by saying, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. And just repeat those last two a couple of times there in your heart space. Thank you. I love you. Thank you. I love you. All right. And you can always repeat that last little part whenever you need to. All right. So as you work with your intellectual and emotional nature. So let's back up a little bit here. Let's look at how unity talks about the threefold nature of humanity. We talk about spirit, mind, and body. And then that mind, in unity, we'll talk about mind with a big M, and by that we mean God mind. And we talk about mind with a little m, and that's the human mind, the consciousness that embodies both the emotional and intellectual natures and the body itself. So the human consciousness and human mind also shows up in a threefold nature. So when we encounter something new, the first response that we have, whether you recognize it or not, is actually in the gut mind, in the belly, my friends. And recent science has demonstrated that not only do we have a brain in our head, there's a second brain down in the belly with all of these neurons and connections and all kinds of messages being processed. And so we call that the gut mind. And the gut mind is the fastest when it comes to processing input from the outer world. So it's felt in the body. It's felt as an instinctual, like yes, no, go, no go. And we feel it as a sense of knowing in our gut. Now, I just want to, as a side point out that in Unity's 12 powers, which is a teaching set that we often use, the power of wisdom is located in the belly, my friends. So wisdom, judgment, discernment happens in the belly. So think about that a little bit. How have you been thinking about that power of wisdom? Have you been thinking of it like up here, or where have you been? Think about it in the belly, my friends. So that root level of knowing that's present before we feel or think anything. All right, the next level of processing in human mind when it receives stimulation is the heart mind that we were just blessing and loving. So this is the emotional feeling nature. And, I'm kind of referencing the chest here because that's where the power of love is located. Now, this level of processing is a little bit slower than the gut mind because the heart basically kind of registers things along nuances, continuums, like hotter, colder, how bad, how good, want, not want. And that's how the heart processes. Now, and then the third that we're very familiar with is the intellectual mind. And this is actually the slowest processor of all, which you may not have realized. So the gut's going really quickly, the heart's going, how much is this? How much? How little? And then the intellectual mind is taking in all of that data, applying labels, sorting, judging, comparing to memories of things that have happened before, and then eventually comes up with a thought, an action, an opinion, And that's how the three levels of human mind work. So a quick example would be if you put your hand on the burner of the stove and it's hot, that first gut mind is like, whew, you pull back physically before you think and feel anything. Your heart mind shows up to with a feeling of shock and looking on the continuum of like how much hurt are we feeling, and then the intellect is going to step in with like, oh, look what happened and what should I do about it. So that's kind of how we process on a normal basis. Now there are lots of uh, uh, avenues of study we have out there to look at ourselves, because human personality individually tends to lead with one of these phases of mind. So for example, the Enneagram shows us which phase of mind we tend to lead with. And then studying those things can, give us questions so that we can go, am I doing a little too much thinking and not enough feeling? Am I all in the feelings and not really thinking things through? Or am I just acting without even thinking about either? So getting to know your emotions and how those phases of mind work is key to your emotional well-being. So once again, just put your hand over your heart space, do a couple repetitions of thank you, I love you. Thank you, I love you. Now, in Unity Metaphysics, one of our core teachings is called the law of mind action. And those of you who've been in Unity for a while may have heard this. The traditional wording is thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. Well, of course, here is the 21st century of Unity Metaphysics. Heart-centered metaphysics says thoughts and feelings held in mind tend to produce after their kind. So why does it say tend to? Well, that would be because we have like a million thoughts a day, and many of them are not productive, right? They're not producing after their kind. It's just like, what time is it? Oh, okay. They're just quick little thoughts. The thoughts that make a difference are the ones that are enhanced by feeling, right? So here's a little bit from heart-centered metaphysics. So feeling is the function of consciousness by which thoughts are empowered and made personal. Yeah? So in Unity Metaphysics, we talk about thought and feeling like units that travel together, not as separate things. So, and with the feeling nature kind of leading the way, doing that first level of interpretation. It's like our feelings are our antenna out in the world to go, what is this that we are encountering? So here's a quote from Paul Hasselbeck. The first time we experience anything seems to have feelings arising before thoughts. And first, the event occurs, we have an emotional reaction, and then we formulate thoughts to understand and communicate about the experience. So that's how we approach it in Unity these days. And luckily, there's an abundance of neuroscience out there to back this up. And that's one thing I love about Unity, is that it goes hand in hand with science, not separate. So I'm not going to read a quote from this book, but I want to share it with you. I've got a big stack of books this month. This is called Mind to Matter by Dawson Church. And so I'm going to paraphrase because his book is incredibly technical, and it was challenging for me to read. I read it a few years ago, but he documents all kinds of neuroscience and then links it up with the nature of spirit that we are all familiar with. So he talks about that we as humans, we sense the energy of the world around us. So he's not talking about physical senses, but the energy. We respond with emotions. Emotions create brain waves. So delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma, if you're familiar with brain waves. And those waves create chemical neurotransmitters that then communicate with the thinking brain. So that this kind of documentation of how feelings and thoughts work together, and feelings are out there first, kind of sensing, how do we feel about this that's going on in the world? So our feelings are always present, always involved, and always valid, my friends. So here's a quote from the Good Therapy blog in 2019. Emotions by themselves are neither good nor bad. They are simply reactions. Now, the way we act or react on our emotions can strongly affect our well-being. Now, because of that cultural history that we have, that we talked about at the beginning, we can have a tendency to judge our emotions as being good or bad, healthy or unhealthy. And because of that judging, many of us have a tendency, when one of those emotions that we judge as bad, we don't want to feel it, we stuff it down, or we, kind of dismiss it as, and don't honor it. But our feelings are there to provide us with helpful information. And feelings are complicated, right? So Brene Brown talks about our feelings being layers of experiences of biology, biography, behaviors, and backstory. But whatever they are, my friends, feelings are always present, always involved, always valid. One more time. Thank you. I love you. Thank you. I love you. So, on our journey to emotional well-being, we want to get to know our emotions better. We want to value our emotions, and we want to interpret our emotions through the filter of spirit. So, coming close to the end of the talk here, but let me just say that on a spiritual level, our feelings, again, lead the way like antenna, and they let us know if what we are encountering and how our human brain is engaging with it is in alignment with our truth. So let's say we value compassion, and we find ourselves out there judging on some things, and those feelings show up. We kind of get into it. It's like, oh, this is not a pleasant way to feel. Well, this is our emotions saying, hey, this is not in alignment with what our truth is. Come back to center, love. So same way, we value love and we're withholding forgiveness, feeling bitterness. That's not a nice way to feel, right? It's like, oh, what is this telling me? Well, it's telling me to come to center, right? That this is not in alignment with the truth of who I am at the core of my being, right? So emotions prompt us to ask, am I standing in my truth or not? So I encourage you, as the week goes on, to ask yourself that when you find yourself in a collection of feelings, like, is this in alignment with my truth? So this is an ongoing process of getting to know our emotions better, valuing our emotions, not judging them, not dismissing them or stuffing them down, at listening to them and asking this question: is this in alignment with the truth of who I want to be, of what I am in truth? Our feelings are always present, always involved, always valid. So now we're going to move into our time of meditation, my friends. And I'm going to begin this time of meditation with a prayer. This is from Thomas Keating, and it was quoted in a book by Paul Zahl called Peace in the Last Third of Life, a Handbook of Hope for Baby Boomers. So I know some of you identify as baby boomers. So let's take a deep breath. And if you wish, you can allow your outer eyes drift close as we listen to the welcoming prayer. I welcome everything that comes to me today because I know it's for my healing. I welcome all thoughts, feelings, emotions, persons, situations, and conditions. I let go of my desire for power or control. I let go of my desire for affection, esteem, approval, and pleasure. I let go of my desire for survival and security. I let go of my desire to change any situation, condition, person, or myself. I open to the love and presence of God and God's action within. Amen. So let us take that accepting and open energy into our time in the stillness together, right here and now. And as we begin to bring our attention back to the here and now, back to the body in the seat and the breath in the body, let's take a moment to bless this threefold nature of the human mind. So bring your attention to the gut mind, the belly, to the seat of wisdom and discernment. You just take a moment there to say, thank you, I love you. And let's move to the heart space, to the realm of emotions. And there, say, thank you, I love you. And move to the intellectual mind, located in the head. So brilliant and so active. And let's bless it too. Say, thank you, I love you. And we close our time of meditation today with an affirmation. And I'm going to put my hand on my heart space one more time here. Here's our affirmation for today. My feelings are an expression of spirit within me, and I am grateful. Say it with me from home, my friends. My feelings are an expression of spirit within me, and I am grateful. Let's do it one more time. My feelings are an expression of spirit within me, and I am grateful. So I am, so you are, my friends. Thank you so much for being here today. And I am going to hand it back over to our friend Chris, our service leader for today.
Thanks for watching the weekly broadcast from Unity of Fredericksburg. Visit our website at uofva.org to learn more about our mission of spiritual awakening and transformation. Support our ministry with your financial donation. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time.